So everybody that has just entered, remember we are transitioning over to our class document. You are taking the first you are taking until 10:10 to complete those multiple choice questions. Make sure you're reading the primary or secondary source document carefully. And at 10:10, we are going to be reviewing the answers to the do now. And just to clarify, when you are answering the multiple choice, feel free to either like bold the multiple choice question that you choose or like highlight it, or if you're taking notes on regular pieces of paper, just make sure you're writing them down and that you're submitting that you did that for full credit. For those of you guys that just entered, we are working on our due now until 10:10. So you should be working on the due now until 10:10, and then we will review those answers. Again, for those of you guys that just entered, you have another 5 minutes to complete the due now, which is the first page of your class document on Google Classroom. Make sure as you're completing the multiple choice that you are using what annotation skills that you can. So for process of elimination, if you read that option A is definitely not correct, use the crossout feature on Google Classroom. Also, make sure you are bolding or highlighting what you assume is the correct answer or writing that down on a separate piece of paper. About 4 more minutes. I've gotten several questions about where the do now is. Can you please use the raise your hand feature if you're having trouble finding the do now? It's in the document on the assignment in Google Classroom. If you go to Google Classroom, it's listed under the assignment. Here, let me share my screen. Okay. So if you go to APUSH and you see what's due today at 4 o'clock, it's this assignment. So you should be able to click this document, and the do now are these first 6 multiple choice questions. It just doesn't say do now at the top. Okay, 2 more minutes left on completing the do now. Okay, 1 more minute. Okay, great. We are going to quickly go over the do now. So give me 2 seconds. Here we go. Okay, so for number 1, the answer is B. Number 2, the answer is C. Number 3, the answer is A. Any questions on this passage? If you can raise your hand. Yes, Isis.
Can you explain number 2?
Okay, which of the following best represents the author of the frontier? Okay, so the reason why we know that this is about cultural and economic interactions is because of this emphasis between the relationship between Native Americans or Indians and the European settlers. So Indians were evicted from the region, and it ceased to be the meeting point of peoples that it had long been. So that is talking about it's a meeting place of cultural and economic interactions. Whoops. Okay, is there another question? Great. Okay, we are now going to go to questions 4 through 6. Number 4 is B. Number 2 is C. Sorry, number 4 is B, number 5 is C. And number 6 is A. So B, C, A. Any questions on 4 through 6?
Are we switching our answers? Or are we leaving our original answers so you can just see?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, great. We are now going to transition into a lecture. So please make sure that you have some paper and a writing utensil available, so that way you can take your lecture notes. I'll give you guys 30 seconds to make sure you have all your materials. As a reminder, this is being recorded, so if you have any concerns or questions about the content, save them for the very end. But if you just need to come back and because you missed a certain point, this is going to be recorded and put on Google Classroom, so you can fill up those notes later. Yes, Cedric.
Actually, I had I think I'll save it for the end. It was a definition of a word.
Okay, what's the word?
Regional differences.
Did you say internal differences?
No, regional differences.
Regional differences. Okay, so regional differences is what we talk about when we compare like the North and the South. So like, what are the regional differences between the North and the South? And you would say the region of the North is rockier and colder, and the South is warmer and has better land to farm. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great. We should all have some paper and pencils ready to take some notes. Great. Okay, so today we are going to be reviewing period 4. So this is going to be very quick. As I said earlier, this lesson is being recorded, so please save your questions for the end, or if you need me to repeat material, you can come back to the video and fill in those lecture notes, because I want to make sure that I give you guys enough time to get all of the materials done by 10:50. So that way APUSH can be done before even lunchtime. Okay. So today we're going to be looking at period 4, and similar to the past review lessons, we're going to be looking at period 4 through some key dates and how these years really changed the course of American history. And the first year that we are going to be looking at is the year of 1803, which is when Thomas Jefferson, who is the 3rd president of the United States, makes the Louisiana Purchase. Now, as a reminder, Thomas Jefferson is a Democratic Republican. He is from Virginia, and he believes in the agrarian future of the United States. So, and what this means by his agrarian future or his agrarian vision is that he sees the United States as being a country defined by farmers and run primarily through farming. So he does not really believe in industrialization. He would rather see the entire country look like his life in terms of large plantations and growing some type of good, whether it be tobacco or cotton or vegetables, fruits, whatever you prefer. And he, and the way that he does this to ensure this agrarian vision can come true is the Louisiana Purchase. The Louisiana Purchase, we bought the Louisiana Territory from France, Napoleon, and he sees all of this land as a way to help expand American farming and American plantations. However, there is another part of the country that is going against this vision through the Market Revolution. So the Market Revolution is one of the first industrial revivals in the United States, where we see an emphasis on inventions that are going to redefine the country. During the Market Revolution, we see the creation of the cotton gin. Now, remember, the cotton gin makes it easier to separate cotton seed from the actual fiber that they use to make cloth. And you used to have to pull the seeds out of the cotton by hand, but with the cotton gin, you just have to crank a machine and it separates it for you. And it makes the production of cotton much easier in the United States, which leads to an expansion of slavery. So as we know, slavery is primarily used in the southern states, and it is a way to exploit labor for a profit in these plantation areas. And these states being like Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, etc. Because of the invention of the cotton gin, we see places like Virginia transition from growing primarily tobacco to cotton. cotton becomes a very cheap cash crop, which creates a lot of profit for the owners of these plantations, especially on the backs of their slaves. Okay. So 1803, obviously a very important year, as the Louisiana Purchase really solidifies the beginning sectionalism of the United States. And then 1812 happens, and the United States is in a new war. Remember, at this time, the United States isn't even 25 years old. We are still a very new country and still trying to solidify that we can be an independent country apart from Britain. And the War of 1812 is between the American colonists and the British with their Native American allies. The British promised Native Americans that if they were to win this war, that they would return some of that stolen land from natives. Who is president? James Madison is president during this time, and he is able to govern the country through the war into a victory. The War of 1812 is when we also see the rise of Andrew Jackson, who becomes a war hero during the War of 1812. And he becomes a very well-known household name, kind of like how George Washington was during the American Revolution. So as the war comes to an end and Madison leaves the presidency, we see the election of James Monroe. And James Monroe is a Democratic Republican, and he is the president during what we call the era of good feelings. The United States has just won a war. We have a very good market revolution economy, and things in general in the United States seem to be doing well. So that's why we call this an era of good feeling. People just in general have a positive sense at being American. Stop drawing on my screen. Okay. And this leads us to our next significant year, 1820, which is when we have the Missouri Compromise. So as we know, with the purchase of the Louisiana Territory, American settlers are able to spread past those original 13 colonies. We are starting to slowly take over the American continent. We also see a wave of migration from Europe, specifically from places like Germany, Ireland, and England. So we have more what we call old immigrants coming in from Western Europe, and they need a place to go. They can't all settle in the cities. And so we start seeing the settling of states like Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Tennessee, etc. As these states begin to be settled and become states in the country, we see that new debate over sectionalism and whether or not these new states should be slave states or free states. The slave state, on each side, we see this desire to maintain like 50-50 representation, which means half of Congress and the Senate should be represented by slave states and half of it should be represented by slave states in order to keep it fair. And so there is this debate over how do we do that. In the Missouri Compromise, the way that they do it is they admit Missouri as a slave state and they create Maine as a free state. So all of the state numbers stay equal. But as I said, this sectionalism, this Missouri Compromise represents sectionalism as we see these conflicting interests over slavery really take hold. And again, the slavery is rooted in cotton production. And we get to my favorite person. I can't stand him. I know you guys love that, how much I love Andrew Jackson. In 1828, we see the election of Andrew Jackson. As I said earlier, during the War of 1812, Andrew Jackson becomes a war hero and becomes the symbol of the United States as a war hero. He is elected in 1828 as a Democrat. So the Democrat, it's no longer the Democrat Republicans, but the Democrats. And he some of the things that he is the most known for is his desire to destroy the national bank, which is a bad idea, and also his Native American policies. Let me check one thing. And one of the most notable laws that he passes is the Indian Removal Act, which overrides a Supreme Court decision and argues that the Native Americans have to leave their reservations in Georgia and other southern states, and they should be pushed elsewhere in the country. So he overrides a Supreme Court decision and pushes Native Americans out of the territory that they are currently inhabiting. Which leads us to, which was in 1830, the Indian Removal Act. And and Jackson's Native policies are some of the most defining features of his presidency, and the reasons why I'm not a fan. So we have the Indian Removal Act. Natives are being forced out of their land, and we see other things start to come up in regards to Native policy. You see the creation of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is a federal group that is in charge of how do we handle these Native people in terms of the American government. So this is a federal, which means it's not state, it's the whole United States country. And how do they approach the natives living within the country? That's what the Bureau of Indian Affairs is. We also see the creation of Indian Territory. Indian Territory is right in the middle of the United States. It's in what we call Oklahoma now. Oklahoma is, Indian Territory will become Oklahoma. And this is where all of the natives are going to be forced to move. So Indian Territory is where they're getting shoved after being removed from their land. And this transportation from their land to Indian Territory is what we now know as the Trail of Tears. It's defined by sickness, disease, starvation, malnutrition, and dehydration, as well as just general exhaustion. It is a very, very long journey that they are not adequately prepared for, and thousands die on their forced transportation from the southern states to this new Indian Territory. And this is what the Trail of Tears is, this brown line right here. Okay, great. This leads us to another defining time period. I'm gonna give you guys like 30 seconds to finish writing down what I just said while I take a drink of water. Okay. So 1844, we see the election of James K. Polk. James Polk is another Democrat that is very supportive of the idea that Americans have a right to the land of North America. And he specifically looks at this new independent state of Texas. He sees the northern continent as a place for Americans to take over and make it their own. Now, who can remind me what the Wilmot Proviso is? See if I can get a hand. Because we talked about it a lot. Yes, Ariana.
Wasn't that to like stop slavery in like certain territories that's like from the
In Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the Mexican War.
Beautiful. Ariana and Cedric, I'm giving you guys merits for that. Let me write that down.
Thank you.
Extra merits. Okay, yes. So the Wilmot Proviso, as Ariana said, this is just a really important law when we talk about the history of slavery. It is an unsuccessful, but it's still important that we know it. It is a law pushed towards Congress asking that we do not allow slavery to enter any territory we get from the Mexican-American War or Texas. Now, remember, the Mexican cession is like Colorado, Utah, Arizona, as we spread west. And this congressional proposal asks that we stop the spread of slavery. It doesn't ask that we stop slavery in general. It asks that we stop the spread of slavery into new territories. But it is ultimately unsuccessful. And this leads us, we are going to end it with 1848. So 1848 is a very important time period when we look at the social change in the United States. The United States has just won the Mexican-American War. We have the Mexican Cession Territory, and slavery continues to spread. We also see a rise from the Second Great Awakening, a new religious revival that pushes for individualism and a sense of individual identity. So it pushes forward more independent thought. And this is where we see things like the Seneca Falls Convention. The Seneca Falls Convention is a group of mostly women, but there are some male allies that do join this, where women specifically push forward this desire for equal rights and equal representation with men. And this is in 1848. And the reason why I'm restamping that date is how long it's going to take for women to get the 19th Amendment. It's going to take another 70 years. But in 1848, out of the Second Great Awakening, we see this new desire, or not a new desire, but a reinvigorated desire of women to assert their rights to equality. As I said, the 1848 is also the end of the Mexican-American War, and we have all this new slave territory, and we see a reinvigoration in the abolition movement. Abolitionism, as a reminder, is the desire to not just stop the spread of slavery, but stop slavery. You can find a lot of different abolitionists, and there's a lot of different abolitionist thinking. Some will say we have to stop the spread of slavery. Some will say we need to stop slavery in general. And then some will say Black Americans deserve equal rights. Abolitionism has a lot of different layers to it. But as abolitionists see the spread of slavery continue despite things like the Wilmot Proviso, they see that they need to take this a lot more seriously and that they need to push for the end of slavery. So again, abolitionism starts in the early 1800s, but it's in 1848 that we see it reinvigorated and the desire to stop slavery emphasized even more. Okay, I'm going to give you guys, I'm going to set a timer and I'm going to mute myself. Take 2 minutes to do this stop and jot. Yes, Erica.
Does this have anything to do with our packet?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Okay, you guys are going to take 2 minutes for a stop and jot. I'm going to set the timer and mute myself. At the very end, I'm going to be cold calling and hearing what 3 key terms you came up with from today's lecture. So 2 minutes, be prepared to be cold called when the 2 minutes is up. Thank you for that question, Jamal. I'm going to address that when we transition to the exit ticket. You have 1 more minute. 20 seconds. Make sure you have 3 key terms that you would use to describe what happened. Oh my gosh, stop. Okay. Whew. Okay, so I'm going to cold call. I'm going to ask you for the story of period 4, and I want you to specifically highlight the 3 key terms that you came up with, starting with Janiqua.
I said Market Revolution, Trail of Tears, and Wilmot Proviso.
Mhm. Great. And can I hear from Naziah?
I said the same thing about the Trail of Tears, but I went even further into the Indian Removal Act because mainly the period focused on spreading more westward, so they had to move the Indians.
Please raise your hand if you would like to share which key terms you thought are the most important and that are different than what Janiqua or Naziah said. Jade.
I said that the 3 most important key terms were the Wilmot Proviso. I used more than 3. Is that okay?
Of course.
Okay, I said the Seneca Falls Convention, the Market Revolution, and the Missouri Compromise.
Beautiful. Great. Do we have any questions from today's lecture? You can raise your hand. Great. Before we transition to the exit ticket, I purposely cut down today's lesson really short to make sure that you guys could put into practice what Ms. Wright said by having all of this stuff done within the hour. So we're going to have extra time on our exit ticket, but I'm going to address something that Jamal brought up. Thank you for reminding me, Jamal. Today's lecture notes are a part of your grade. So when you complete your packet, you need to turn that in with pictures of your lecture notes. The lecture notes are going to be 50% of your grade, and then the exit ticket will be the other 50%. So remember, you're getting attendance based off of Zoom, and then eventually that quiz grade, but I am going to be looking at your lecture notes and your exit ticket for your actual grade for today's class, which will be either a classwork or a homework grade. Yes, Erica.
So are you no longer going to be sending video lectures?
So this is being recorded and then it's going to be posted on Google Classroom. But no, there's no more pre-recorded lessons. So I'm going to finish, this is going to be finished up in 15 minutes. I'm going to upload it to YouTube and then post the link into Google Classroom for you guys to have access to this video if you need to go back and take more for any clarifications on the notes. Any other questions? Beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to not stop sharing my screen. I need to get out of my PowerPoint. Let's get out of here. Great. So we're going to transition to the exit ticket. You guys, as you know, are going to be writing a modified DBQ for the AP exam. So we are going to spend a lot of time with either essay planning and document analysis, everything that you need to be able to do to write a great DBQ in the time provided. So today you guys are going to be using your lecture notes, looking at the prompt, which is evaluate the extent to which technological innovations affected the development of regional differences in the first half of the 19th century. And you need to write down some context key terms and evidence key terms. I'm going to be looking for about 3 for each. So I'm going to remain on Zoom here with you to answer your questions as you guys do this. But once this is done, we still have 13 minutes and you guys should get this done by 10:50. So I'm going to ask that you guys complete this, message me here on Zoom. I'm going to answer your guys' questions in just a second. I'm gonna ask that you guys complete this now so that way APUSH is done and we were practicing getting everything done before 10:50, and then you guys can leave the Zoom. So I'm gonna ask that you guys stay on Zoom with me while you complete this. Tell me that you finished it, and then you guys can go ahead and exit. Yes, Erica.
So we don't actually have to answer the question?
Nope, you just need to give me context and evidence points. Like I said, I wanted to make sure our first day of launch went smoothly. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and message me if you have any, you can either raise your hand if you have questions, but message me when you are done. I'm gonna make sure that it's been uploaded to Google Classroom, and then you guys can feel free to leave the Zoom and take a break. Yes, Isis?
For the, what's that called? For the evidence, are we just putting key terms or?
Yes.
Okay.